The story of the picture that inspired the film Emancipation begins in a Union Army encampment in Louisiana. And joining us today from Baton Rouge, Dr. August Malveaux, a history professor at Southern University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this picture, the picture of Whipped Peter, which will remain in infamy throughout history. That is what became, for many, the precipice of what slavery was all about back then, because no one had ever seen it before, especially in the North.
Yes, I think the images of Whipped Peter is very profound, and I think that it has somewhat of an impact on the mindset of people who had not really experienced slavery firsthand or knew of the actual brutality of the system itself, you know, of American slavery in terms of the part that we often refer to as chattel slavery, and the dynamics of being a person living in slavery, not knowing what is going to happen to you. And I think that when you look at the Civil War era, this marks the beginning to an end of a long track of American slavery, which African Americans endured, and a very trying time for the country politically, as many politicians are arguing, going back and forth in terms of what the longevity, if there should be a longevity to this awful institution, this very inhumane institution.
Professor, for those who haven't seen the picture, first of all, let's show the picture and let's talk about how it came to be. A slave escaped, I should say. It took him 10 days to get to the Union encampment. When he got there, he took off his shirt, and they actually saw keloid scars on his back from where he had been whipped multiple times. These are things a lot of people had not seen. It brought the face of slavery, you know, to everyone, because that picture went viral, to use a term from today.
Yes, I think that picture, more than almost any other picture, had been utilized by many historians and many who had an interest in trying to capture the brutality of American slavery. Whipped Peter, the struggle, just thinking about the struggle of this real life person as he made it to the Union Army outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
The funny thing about that, I'm sorry, the funny thing about that is we saw that picture. It's gone down in history, but we don't know what happened to Whipped Peter after that, do we?
Right. That's correct.
And that's interesting, because they didn't follow that person. Instead, they followed what he meant, what symbol he was to people. And you have been to that encampment because you are located in Baton Rouge, where it was, right? When you go there, what does it feel like to you?
I think it's a reminder of the struggles and how difficult it was for one to navigate through that area, through those swamps, to get to reach this point where they may have freedom, and knowing that as they are going through this area, and this is a very the terrain, the landscape of, you know, the area itself is very difficult to navigate through.
Right.
So it takes someone who is very committed, very determined, you know, a strong sense of self-determination to be able to escape people who are trying to catch you, the individuals who have the dog catchers and the different people who are out to, like bounty hunters, out to capture you and bring you back into the institution.
He and others even covered themselves with onions to throw off the animals, looking for them. Some critics are saying that picture was sensationalism. What do you say to that?
I disagree. I think that perhaps if times were different, we'd probably find even more horrific pictures than that of Whipped Peter. But I think that if by chance that was one of the photos that really garnered a lot of attention, a lot of national attention, maybe because of the fact that it was to a point when people seen what happened to him, and they wonder, how can one human being endure that much suffering?
And he was just one of many, as you say. It shows how powerful a picture can be, how powerful a movie can be. Have you seen Emancipation, and do you think this is powerful, and will this make a difference? Because some people may not have seen Whipped Peter or know of him before this movie.
I think it's going to make a difference. I think more people are going to be interested in this part of American history. This really brings to light the importance of the Civil War and how important it was for the country to move beyond the Civil War in the midst of the Second Industrial Revolution. The country is changing in so many ways, and many are trying to hold on to this institution that has has pretty much captured too much attention in terms of American politics.
Is it disappointing to you that a lot of people didn't know about this, even though that picture did go viral back then and they thought about it, it sparked abolitionists to, take more of a stance. But does it upset you that in 2022, a lot of people are just now learning about Whipped Peter?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really upset me. I'm not really disappointed. I think that there's so much more we have to unearth or uncover in terms of that particular part of American history, especially the Civil War era and those years right up to that point. So that is, I think this gives us an opportunity to revisit some of that period. So hopefully this will serve as a catalyst to more individuals bringing up stories like this to give us a full understanding of how far the country has came, how much we have grown as a nation. So
how much more we need to grow. How much more we need to grow.
And that too.
Right. As an historian, what do you think about the depiction of these movies? Because, everything is not going to be factual, obviously, because a lot of people aren't around anymore, and there weren't a lot of notes taken, a lot of diaries, a lot of journals kept, and a lot of, oral history has been lost over the years. Does it bother you that things may not be factual completely?
No, I'm not truly overly concerned with that. I think that anytime you're trying to bring to life particular historical events, there's going to be these nuances, there's going to be these issues, there's going to be some problems. But for the most part, it is better to try to shape a narrative of real life experiences than not do it at all. Okay, so there's something has to be done in order for us to try to bring to life these experiences that millions of Americans had and learn from those experiences as a society.
Dr. August Malveaux, thank you so much. Be safe, be well.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to you.